Hi, I'm Snigdha Sharma and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the IPCC's latest climate change report. We also discuss the government's proposal to use Aadhaar for new voters. And we also go over the latest updates from the parliament. Beginning with the big story. 3 hard-hitting words. It is unequivocal. This is what the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's new report says. According to the report, the global climate crisis is unequivocally caused by human activities and is unequivocally impacting every part of our only home, planet Earth. Over 750 scientists contributed to the first part of the IPCC's 6th report that was released on Monday. For it, they reviewed over 14,000 scientific publications. Floods, wildfires, melting glaciers, and polluted oceans. These are happening already. The IPCC has said that the 1.5-degree warming is inevitable even in the best-case scenario. And, according to the report, if we do not stay within the danger limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius, then, well, the results are going to be catastrophic. It is code red for humanity. So to discuss further details of the eye-opening report, we were joined by Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha. So, Amitabh, can you begin by telling us what is the new climate change report?
So, as you would know, the IPCC produces these periodic reviews of the status of climate, and this is the 6th in that series. And IPCC was established in 1988, and the first report came out in 1990. That was called the First Assessment Report. And then in the next 3 decades, this one is the 6th such assessment report. These are very voluminous reports, very, very detailed reports. The current one is about 4,000 pages long. And this is just 1/3 of the report. Only the first part of the entire report has come out. There are 2 more parts, and those will come out next year. So basically, the IPCC was formed to assess the state of Earth's climate. It was formed in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and the UN Environment Program. They together set up this IPCC. And its mandate was to do a status check, sort of a health check on the Earth's climate. And that health check is done through these assessment reports. And also, it's important to understand that IPCC itself does not do any scientific research. So it does not do any new science. It does not present any new data. All that it does is it reviews all the scientific literature that is available in the world in any language, anywhere it has been published. So all these scientific publications related to climate change, IPCC reviews each one of them and then comes to conclusion. So IPCC assembles the best known subject experts from across the world and tells them to go through all the scientific literature on climate change and then come up with the conclusions and logical fallout of all the studies that have happened on climate change over all these years.
These reports are the most widely accepted and comprehensive scientific opinion on climate change, and they form the basis on which governments take climate action and form their policies. They also form the foundation on which international climate change negotiations are held. There are mainly 2 big takeaways from this recent report. Listen to Amitabh as he tells us.
2 big headline statements. I think one, the fact that the 1.5-degree rise in temperature is likely to happen within the next 2 decades itself, most possibly before 2040. And 2, it's now been established almost with beyond doubt that this warming, the rise in global temperature, is happening because of human activity. Now, I'll just briefly tell you why these 2 are probably the standout headlines from this report. Now, 1.5 degrees centigrade rise is something that we have been talking about for a very long time. If you remember, there's this Paris Agreement on Climate Change, which was negotiated in 2015. It talks about limiting the global rise in temperatures to within 2 degrees centigrade. From where? From pre-industrial times. And what are pre-industrial times? It is the average of 1850 to 1900. So the average temperatures that were maintained, say, between 1850 and 1900, from those average temperatures, the rise in temperature should be limited to within 2 degrees centigrade. That is the objective. Now, we have already reached, and this report also highlights that fact that we have already reached 1.1 degrees from the pre-industrial time. So temperature rise to 2 degrees is the stated objective. That's what the world is working towards. That's what all the countries are framing their policies to reach that objective. Also in the Paris Agreement is that while the stated objective is to keep it below 2 degrees, at the same time, it also says that we should strive to keep it below 1.5 degrees itself. So there has been a great discussion going on 1.5 degrees for a very long time. And for the first time in this report, the IPCC has given a very definitive time scale at which this 1.5 degrees centigrade target is getting reached. So it's saying that it's most likely will be reached in the next 2 decades itself. And overall, it's saying by the year 2100, most likely in all the scenarios that it has looked at, the global rise in temperatures would most likely exceed 2 degrees centigrade. Unless and until there are very strong actions that are initiated immediately.
So Amitabh, what happens if we cross the 2-degree ceiling?
So the previous IPCC reports, actually, they used to use a phrase called catastrophic and irreversible changes in the climate system. So if we don't keep to the 2 degrees limit, there would be catastrophic and irreversible change. That phrase that used to be very commonly. Basically, it's not a threshold beyond which something very drastic will happen. And if we remain within that limit, then nothing is going to happen. The impacts of rising temperature is graded. So we will continue to see the impacts and experience the impacts even if we do not cross the 2 degrees limit. But 2 degree is a limit that scientists over the years have specified as one threshold that we should not cross, because after that, things really become unbearable. The kind of impacts are the same. So what are the impacts? We'll see a rise in sea levels. We'll see a rise in temperatures. We will see the rise in extreme events. And by extreme events, I mean extreme heat waves, extreme rainfall events. There would be short bursts of very high rainfall. And at the same time, there would be prolonged droughts over very wide areas. So it's the same kind of impacts that you would see even at 1.5 degrees, at 2 degrees, and even beyond. The scale of the impact, it goes on increasing as we go along the temperature curve. So after 2 degrees is something that scientists say the kind of impacts that we will see would be very, very unbearable.
Now, many countries, more than 100, have already announced their intentions to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. These include major emitters like the United States, China, and the European Union. Net zero, also known as carbon neutrality, does not mean that a country will bring down its emissions to zero. That would be gross zero, which means reaching a state where there are no emissions at all, which obviously cannot happen. So net zero is a state in which a country's emissions are compensated by absorption and removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. But India, which is the third largest emitter in the world, has been holding out. It argues that it was already doing much more than it was required to do, performing better in relative terms than other countries. It says that any further burden would jeopardize its efforts to pull its millions out of poverty. Also important to note that net zero emissions are not the ultimate solution. In fact, Oxfam has said that net zero carbon targets may be a dangerous distraction from the priority of cutting carbon emissions. In its new report, the organization has said, and I'm quoting, "Land-hungry net zero schemes could force an 80% rise in global food prices and more hunger, while allowing rich nations and corporates to continue dirty business as usual." And now coming to the second big takeaway from the report, or what the IPCC has called unequivocal evidence that what we are witnessing is linked to human activities. Amitabh tells us more.
Now, that has again been a very debatable issue right from the start of climate debate in the 1980s, whether the warming that we are seeing is because of human activities or whether it is following a natural variability cycle. So in the initial assessment reports, IPCC had been maintaining that, it looks to be very likely caused by human activities. And the confidence level kept on increasing. throughout, and we kept on saying, IPCC in successive assessment reports kept on saying that, look, the evidence for this warming happening because of human activities is consistently increasing. So we are much more confident now in saying that this warming is being caused by human activity. In this report, I think IPCC has discarded all doubts, and it's saying that there is absolutely no doubt now. The word that it uses is unequivocal. It says the warming is unequivocally happening because of human activities. So I think these are two big headline statements from this assessment report. There's nothing in this report that is not already known, but the scientists have gathered much more evidence. They have presented much more evidence, and therefore they are able to state these things with much more confidence.
Now, for the Indian subcontinent, the report has stated that the observed mean surface temperature increase has clearly emerged from the range of internal variability compared to 1850 to 1900. Heat extremes have increased while cold extremes have decreased, and these trends will continue over the coming decades. The report added that average and heavy precipitation will also increase over much of Asia. Also, among the most alarming findings that will directly impact India, according to the report, is that global warming will have a serious impact on mountain ranges across the world, including the Himalayas. The report says that glaciers are melting and receding across the Himalayas, and that this is now a phenomenon that is locked in and cannot be reversed. It adds that the level of temperature rise in the mountains and glacial melt is unprecedented in 2,000 years. This means increased floods as well as an increased scarcity of water in the future in states across the Himalayas. The report also predicts the increased likelihood of incidents such as the landslide caused by glacial break on Nanda Devi at Chamoli in Uttarakhand earlier this year that caused floods in the region. Now coming back to Amitabh. As destructive as humans have proven to be time and again, Amitabh, one of our saving graces is hope. So tell us, is there hope or is it too late? What can we do now?
Is it too late is a question that is being addressed for, again, very long time. And for scientists, they had been saying even in the year 2000, at the start of this millennium, there are people who believe that it's already too late, that we have been experiencing the impacts of global warming already. So to address that question, is it too late, is to try to understand where we are right now, in the sense that we are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. So what that means is that we are already in climate change, where we are already being affected by climate change. So in that way, it is already too late because the temperature is not normal. We are already experiencing lots of extreme events, heavy precipitation, droughts, sea levels are rising. Some of that is happening already in irreversible manner. For example, the melting of ice in the Arctic, the retreat of glaciers. Those are the kind of things that even if suddenly all the emissions were to stop magically, these things will continue to go on for hundreds or possibly even thousands of years before rolling themselves back. So some of this is already happening in an irreversible manner. So if we look at from that aspect, then of course it's already too late. We are already experiencing it. Now, from the other aspect is to look at, can we keep it like this and not let it deteriorate further? So from that aspect, of course, it's not too late. And this report also makes that case that even though we are probably touching 1.5 degrees global warming by 2040, and it's mostly inevitable situation that we are in, the fact is that if we start taking actions immediately now, then it's possible to remain under 2 degrees centigrade. And it's even possible to attain 1.5. So we will probably cross 1.5 somewhere around 2040, rise up to 1.6 degrees, and then slowly come back to 1.5 degrees with the help of some technological interventions as well, carbon dioxide removing technologies and all. So it's possible. So that way, it's not still too late.
And now coming to the government's proposal to use Aadhaar for new voters. The government has approached the Unique Identification Authority of India, or UIDAI, with a proposal to permit the Election Commission, or the EC, to use Aadhaar for registration of new voters. The EC had actually started the exercise of linking Aadhaar with EPIC, or Electors Photo Identity Card, back in February 2015. But the entire process was suspended in August of the same year after the Supreme Court restricted the use of Aadhaar to the public distribution system and the distribution of LPG and kerosene. So why is it being proposed again, and how is it different this time? To help us understand, Indian Express's Ritika Chopra joined the podcast. So Ritika, can you begin by telling us why is the Law Ministry seeking permission to allow Aadhaar card for registering new voters?
So this month, the Law Ministry had written to the Unique Identification Authority of India asking for their opinion on a proposal, the Election Commission of India, to allow EC to use Aadhaar for authentication purposes in case of new voter registration and, of course, for other purposes as well, but primarily for that. And the Law Ministry suggested in its letter that Aadhaar would act as a quick authentication device and that it would lead to faster delivery of this service. So aside from new voter registration, it also is such as change of address for existing voters, or say downloading of the e-Epic, which is the electronic electors photo identity card or voter slips. So basically it would be an authentication device which would help in faster delivery of services that I just mentioned.
Right. So Ritika, how is this different from the previous proposal by the Election Commission asking for an amendment to the RP Act?
So yes, it's a fact that a couple of years ago in 2019, Election Commission had actually approached the Law Ministry, and what it wanted was the government's approval to link the Aadhaar numbers with their electoral database. And they wanted to use this as a back-end exercise to weed out duplicate voters. So they felt that they would have a more authentic voter database if they linked Aadhaar with their database. And for that purpose, they had suggested that the Representation of People Act should be amended, which would empower the electoral registration officer to ask people to provide their Aadhaar numbers if needed for identification purposes. I must point out, though, that for both proposals, the current one made recently by the Law Ministry to UIDAI on behalf of the Election Commission, as well as a proposal made by EC in 2019 to Law Ministry, the Commission has always maintained that the use of Aadhaar for either this faster delivery of services such as new registration of voters or just for the deduplication exercise that they wanted earlier, all of this would be voluntary. No voter, existing or new, would be denied the right to vote or registration for want of an Aadhaar card.
So also another important aspect to understand how it is different this time is rule number 3 of the Aadhaar rules of 2020, right? Can you tell us more about it?
If you remember, I just mentioned that in 2019, when the EC made this first proposal, they had sought an amendment to the RP Act. As we all know, amendments to an act can only happen when the parliament is in session. And of course, it requires this whole process. Before that, it goes through process of consultation, drafting of amendments, passing of the cabinet's approval of those amendments. That's when it reaches parliament, and there will hopefully be a discussion and debate on it before it's passed. So that takes time, as opposed to what the government has proposed right now is that if the UIDA agrees to it, then the Rule 3 of the Aadhaar authentication for good governance rules. These were rules brought in by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology last year in 2020. The government feels that this could happen right away under Rule 3 because this rule states that Aadhaar authentication can be used, and I quote, in the interest of good governance, preventing leakage of public funds, promoting ease of living of residents, and enabling better access to services for them, stop quote. So I guess the EC as well as the Law Ministry feels that this could be permitted under that enabling better access to services, part of the Rule 3 of the Aadhaar authentication for good governance rules. So this can happen immediately if all the parties are on board. And while this does not exactly amount to linking of the Aadhaar with the electoral database, this wouldn't be back in exile, but this will definitely be a start. In 2015, the Election Commission had anyway started linking of Aadhaar with the voter database on a voluntary basis. It was stopped by the Supreme Court at that point because the court said that Aadhaar needs to be used for delivery of public services. But by then, the Election Commission had already linked about 30 crore voters, rather their EPIC cards, with Aadhaar. while this will not be exactly the same thing, but it will kind of resume that process in some way. This will definitely be a restart of sorts.
Right. And finally, Ritika, the most important question. If this does go through, how will it affect voters? Are there any privacy concerns?
Even, in fact, in 2019, when the EC had first proposed a linking of Aadhaar with its own database, and even at that point, experts had expressed concerns, of course, with regard to privacy. And there are a couple of things that have been mentioned in this regard. One, of course, the fact that why would EC assume that the Aadhaar would actually help in weeding out fraud voters when the government itself, I guess, in one of its replies to a parliament question, has admitted in the past that the Aadhaar itself is prone to fraud, that there could be duplicate Aadhaar numbers as well. So, and in fact, if one does end up linking, say, one of those fraud Aadhaar or duplicate Aadhaar numbers, and that would actually lead to further fraud in terms of people being able to get duplicate voter ID cards. So experts have questioned that assumption of the Election Commission itself, that why would you think that this database isn't prone to fraud and that this database will actually help you address the problem of voter ID fraud. And of course, given that there have been concerns that have been expressed in terms of the fact that maybe if these two databases are linked, then this may give the governments a handle in terms of surveillance. There are concerns expressed with regard to disenfranchisement, that maybe this may lead to some unjust disenfranchisement of legitimate voters. And the example that experts and activists often point to is what happened in Telangana before the Telangana Assembly elections, where a large number of voters were deleted from the state electoral roll. And it was later discovered that this was done as part of sort of this cleanup exercise, or rather an attempt made by the Election Commission or the Chief Electoral Officer of that state to actually clean the voter rolls of invalid and duplicate voter names. And for that purpose, it was revealed that the Aadhaar was used. And if you remember Jwala Gata, the sports person, she was among people who found that her name was deleted, and people suspected that it was again part of that exercise. So there is that concern also that has been expressed. And of course, as I mentioned, privacy, that given that the Aadhaar database also is prone to leaks. So what is the guarantee that once it's leaked, once it's linked to the voter database, whether that would not further compromise the voters? Frankly, we don't know much about how this will actually be implemented, which is why a lot of these questions are being asked. At this point, we only know about the broad, vague contours of a proposal, rather the intention of the commission to link it. We don't know how it's going to happen, what measures would be put in place to ensure that the database is secure. So, which is why a lot of people are asking questions and expressing concerns over this proposal.
And finally, coming to the latest updates from the parliament. The proceedings of both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha were disrupted several times on Monday as the opposition parties continued their protest over the Pegasus snooping row, farm laws and other issues. The Congress, the Trinamool Congress and the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam also staged a walkout in the Rajya Sabha. In the upper house, the proceedings were adjourned twice in the pre-lunch session following an uproar by the opposition members. After Chairman Venkaiah Naidu's speech congratulating India's Olympic team, opposition parties insisted on a discussion on Pegasus, which allegedly is being used to snoop on opposition leaders, government critics and journalists. Chairman Naidu said that he has admitted a discussion on the farmers' agitation against farm laws, price rise and the flood situation in some parts of the country, but the opposition parties insisted that the Pegasus issue should also be discussed. Some opposition members stood up and moved towards the well of the House, following which Naidu adjourned the proceedings till 12 p.m. The House then assembled again at 3:30 p.m. with the leader of the opposition and Congress MP Mallikarjun Kharge protesting against the taking up of the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill. He said that the supplementary agenda was circulated at 2:15 p.m. and that the members of the House cannot do justice during the debate on a bill which gets circulated only a few hours before being taken up. Following this, the Congress, the TMC and the DMK staged a walkout. However, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman moved the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill for consideration and return. It was passed after a brief debate. The Central Universities Amendment Bill of 2021 was also passed, and another bill seeking to abolish as many as 9 appellate tribunals, including the Film Certification Appellate Tribunal or FCAT, was also passed in the upper house. Meanwhile, the Lok Sabha also witnessed continued protests by opposition members over the Pegasus snooping controversy and other issues. Ayush Minister Sarbananda Sonowal introduced the National Commission for Homeopathy Amendment Bill of 2021 and the National Commission for Indian System of Medicine Amendment Bill of 2021 amid strong opposition. Later, Social Justice and Empowerment Minister Virendra Kumar introduced the Constitution 127th Amendment Bill of 2021, which seeks to restore the state's power to make their own OBC lists. You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Snigdha Sharma, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. You can follow us and leave us feedback on Facebook or Twitter at Express Podcasts, or send us an email at podcasts@indianexpress.com. And if you like the show, please do subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts from so more people can find us. You can also look for us in the audio section in the top right corner of our website, indianexpress.com.